Welcome to your weekend. I'm Mike Krause from the Independence Institute, filling in for your usual host, Jon Caldara, who was actually rushed off to an emergency hair transplant procedure. We wish him well. He'll be back in a few weeks. But in the meantime, Brian Watson running for Colorado State Treasurer. How are you, sir?
I'm wonderful. Thanks for having me back on the show.
Thanks. Good. Yeah, no, glad to have you back. So I'm very curious. How is, you've never run for office before?
Actually,
statewide office, but
statewide office. First time for statewide office.
Well, how you liking the actual campaigning for statewide office versus kind of the idea of campaigning for statewide office?
Well, you know, I absolutely love it. It's an awfully big state. We have 64 counties in the state. We just got finished doing a 10-county tour over 3 days through southern and western Colorado. And if you love connecting with people and sharing a positive message, it's for you. If you don't, then you should be doing something else.
Yeah, probably so. All right, so here's kind of what it's looking like. The treasurer race is kind of running below the radar of this really big and expensive gubernatorial race, and then these really big and expensive ballot measures that are out there. So what's probably going to happen is people are going to start getting their all mail-in ballots. They're going to open them up. People inclined to vote for Democrats will probably vote for the Democrat. People who vote Republican will vote for you. There's going to be this broad swath of people who are probably going to open this thing and go, who the heck is Brian Watson?
Yeah.
And hopefully they'll do a little research, but if they don't want to, tell us, give us the pitch. Who is Brian Watson and why are you doing this?
Yeah. Well, first, Election Day is 47 days from today. Ballots will be mailed to people on October 15th, which is 25 days from today. And, you know, our state's been broken up, a third between Democrats, Republicans, and unaffiliateds. What I ask people, whatever their political affiliation is, go out and do a job interview and decide who's the best candidate for the particular job, instead of just voting party lines. And my hope is that we're not only going to get a lot of Democrat support, but also unaffiliated as well. So I grew up on the western slope of Colorado, little town of Olathe, known for its sweet corn, and everything about the western slope is in my blood. You know, an appreciation of hard work and stewardship and grit, a love of the outdoors and hunting and fishing and a host of other things. And I went to school up in Boulder, got a degree in real estate, and 18 years ago I founded a company called North Star Commercial Partners. And my company, we focus on buying vacant buildings all throughout America to try to create jobs and opportunity and empower Americans. I'm a public school kid as well, and really believe in a great educational system. And so I also go buy vacant buildings for charter schools all around the country. And so we've been blessed and fortunate in building the company up. We started above Ted's Montana Grill on Larimer Square in a few hundred square feet.
Sure.
To now I get to employ about 40 people and own assets in 16 states throughout America, and have built it up to over $1.3 billion of value.
So this would be a bit of a pay decrease for you to become state treasurer?
Well, it's going to be even more than that, because I'll tell you, because I believe so much in stewardship, one of my campaign pledges is not to take a salary from the government when elected. I personally always want to make my money in the private sector and to try to do my part to reduce the cost and burden of government, because it's gotten out of control. So with that pledge, not to take a salary, yes, it will definitely be a pay decrease from that perspective. But again, it's really important to me that we try to reduce that cost and burden for the people.
And you're willing to sign that treasurer paycheck over to me? Okay.
Well, I don't want to take one at all. That is my goal. And, you know, a lot of people said, well, donate at different places, whatever it might be. And some people said, you know what does it matter? It's a drop in the bucket when you think about the size of our government and its spending. Yeah. And what I say to them, you're right. It's a drop in the bucket. And the more drops we can put into a bucket, we can create a 5-gallon pail of excess waste and cost that we can throw out, and to reduce that burden of government on the people.
Okay. The treasurer's office is this pretty well-defined statewide office. I mean, it does a few, actually about 3 really major things. One of them is investing the state's money, our money, the taxpayers' money. That includes bonding as well. And it also includes the Great American Payback, so the unclaimed property. And you, as treasurer, would get to sit on the PARA board, the Public Employees Retirement Association board. So, and PARA, of course, is our biggest unfunded liability and debt in the state, so it's a significant issue, and we're going to get to that in just a little bit. But I wanted to talk about the investing of the money, because something has kind of popped up here in this campaign that I find really interesting, and it's the idea of divestment to make a political statement using investments of taxpayer dollars. And my understanding is there's about $1 million invested, para money invested in gun manufacturers or some kind of gun-related companies. Is that correct? So your opponent has said that if people want to make a statement, and tell me I'm paraphrasing him, that to make a statement against gun violence, what we should do is divest that para investment from those companies to make a statement. And I think to myself, that's using money that is invested for people's retirement to make a political point. And I know this has happened before, and in fact, it's happened. We had, for a while, there was a talk of divesting from Iran as part of a larger federal divestment. And then there was also talk of divesting from companies that support Israel for a while. And to their credit, the para board has always pushed back pretty hard on this idea. But here it is, popped back up again. So tell me, is there ever a place for this kind of thing where you use that taxpayer money, the power of that ability to invest lots of money to make political points?
Well, going back to that job interview, I do encourage people to learn more about the candidates and do that job interview. I'm very different from my opponent, and he has shared many concerning things to me, one of which is this idea here. And he wants to be an activist treasurer in terms of bringing in his political ideology into that and try to prove different points or whatever he may want to be. For me, I want to use my outsider's approach and my business and investment experience to go and try to create the best investments and the best alternatives for the state of Colorado, because it's the people's money, it's not the government's money. And so if he wants to be a career politician and just focus on trying to make political statements, things like our gun manufacturers, I disagree with that. I think we need to look at where are the best returns and the most safe returns for the state of Colorado. And as long as those returns, those investments aren't violating the Constitution of the United States of America, that's the big defining thing for me. So I'm a big Second Amendment supporter. I hunt, I fish, I'm in the outdoors, and so I own guns and I appreciate owning guns. He wants to take and remove that kind of money from gun manufacturers. Now, we're talking about Iran, when they're maybe going against our constitutional rights or who we are as a country, then clearly we should divest of certain countries that are anti-American. But when it comes to things that everyday Americans and specifically Coloradans use on a given day, guns or other things that benefit society, we need to be very smart about that.
You mentioned making sound investments.
Yes.
And there was also a bill recently, I can't remember if it was this last session or the session before, where there was a push to try and get para to invest a certain percentage of its portfolio into renewable energy investments. And that bill died. And tell me if I'm wrong on this, because here's the problem I see with, again, this is using the power of all those tax dollars in the marketplace to either to move a policy dial or to make a policy statement. That if you could go out and find a whole bunch of sound renewable energy companies to invest in, if this would pass, then okay. But what if you can't? That just means that you'd have to actually invest our money into unsound investments just to meet that percentage.
Yeah.
So again, we're taking state money and we're using it to make a policy point. Again, so what do you think of this idea of saying, look, we're going to take X percent of para or X percent of this, and we want to make sure that it's invested over here, because right now that happens to be the trendy thing that people like to talk about, which is renewable energy.
Yeah. So as somebody who lives in Colorado and absolutely loves our state and is in the outdoors all the time, I believe we should be good environmental stewards. Absolutely. I think most Coloradans would agree with that. However, we also have to have good, sound investment policies because, again, we're not here to play political games with the people's money. If an environmental company or any other company, stands the test of the due diligence and they have a good company with a good idea and good market-based returns, then we should invest in them and consider that. But if we're just doing it to prove a political point that is risking the people's money, absolutely we should not do so.
Right. Let's talk about para, because this is the big deal. This is the great. It's the biggest fiscal challenge the state faces by far, without question. So let me see if I can explain this. This is math for dummies. All right. So here, the Public Employees Retirement Association. So this is the retirement for state employees and school teachers, et cetera. So here's a future promise, a benefit that was made to that state employee. Here's the contribution to pay for that benefit. And theoretically, the investment of all this money down here from these contributions will close this gap. Everything meets in the middle, everyone's happy, everything's fine. Is that how it's working?
That's basically the way it's supposed to be. We have a defined contribution plan which sets that. And the way I like to state it is that really a large part of the problem here is within our state legislature. They set the contribution amount, so let's say they're going to give $5 to the program. And then they say that the benefit amount has to be $10. Para is but an administrator who has to make up the difference of the $5, and they invest that capital to do so. But even in where we are right now, that's leaving us with a $30 billion deficit, which is the largest single unfunded debt obligation for the state of Colorado. But let me be clear about something about para. For me, para should be a people issue, not a political partisan issue. And for me, it's people like my sister, who's a school teacher up in Boulder Valley School District, who's working really hard every day, and a host of other teachers around our state, that we have to work on having good financial health and good stewardship for para and actually fixing the problem for them.
Yeah, we run into this problem ourselves because we have a whole project at the Independence Institute on just around para. And you know, when we found that one of the things that often happens, you start talking about para, and what a lot of people hear, especially people who are in para, hear is, you want to take something from me. And what we say is, no, we want to actually make sure it's there for you, and that it's healthy for you.
You're absolutely correct.
But we also want to make sure that taxpayers don't have to bail this thing out in order for that promise to be here for you.
Absolutely. So for para, and again, it's about people, and so there's 600,000 potential people that are going to be depending upon para, but it's affecting our entire state. We're spending over $230 million a year in interest alone on para. This past session was the first time in Colorado history that our state legislature took $225 million from the general fund and applied it to para. Our entire state's credit rating could be downgraded because of para, because we're a higher risk with this unfunded liability. So this is not something that we can kick the can down the road. So my campaign is on behalf of the people of para to make it be healthy and sustainable for them so they have something, but it's also about the people of Colorado. And going back to my pledge not to take a salary from the government, in not taking a salary from the government, I will also not be participating in the para program. So when I go onto that board, I want to work with them and build relationships regardless of political affiliation and help solve issues, and recognize the issues in para, but also to remember the people of Colorado as well, and not to be voting with my own wallet in mind, but actually for the healthy sustainability of a program for many decades to come.
The current treasurer, Walker Stapleton, he sits on the para board. If you're treasurer, you'll sit on the para board.
Correct.
Treasurer Stapleton had what seemed like a pretty simple request. He wanted to see some data from para, and he just wanted to see data on high para retiree recipients, stripped of all identifiable information, because he wanted to have an idea of how many people are getting what kind of retirements in Colorado, and to try and get. And the para fought him all the way up into the courts, and he lost on that. So there seems to be this pretty significant lack of transparency where in other states, you can go see what any government employee makes, and you can almost kind of back out what their para benefit should be. But in Colorado, as a taxpayer or even as the treasurer, we can't know that. I mean, would you continue Treasurer Stapleton's fight to try and open up para to a little more transparency?
Yeah, I take a little bit of a different tact. I've already met with the para board and the treasurer's office. The first thing that I'm going to do when elected state treasurer of Colorado is call every single board member and take them out for a cup of coffee or lunch and get to know them as people and figure out where our commonalities are, and to realize that, hey, we need to build bridges and tear down barriers. Because how can we go out and solve solutions together if I don't even know the other board members? So that's going to be my commitment, and I want to spend time with them and then go and try to tackle these issues together. But you're absolutely correct. You need to have transparency and accountability in a system if you're going to make positive change. So for instance, with para right now, even with Senate Bill 200, they believe that it's about a $30 billion unfunded liability, assuming a 7.25% annualized return on money. But the problem is we don't know the full extent of the problem. And so we need to understand, what are we solving for? You know, I always bring things back in my campaign to what I call dining room table economics. You know, we're all trying to make ends meet, and things have gotten a whole lot more expensive for all of us in Colorado. And so it should be with government. And so this idea, if we're solving for a $30 billion problem or a $80 billion problem, which some think it may be that large, you're going to have different metrics and mechanisms to have those solutions. So let's figure out what is the issue. And I don't care what's been done in the past. What I care about is how we're going to work collectively together to actually make a difference and not kick the can down the road anymore for the people of Colorado.
You brought it up. You talked about Senate Bill 200, which was an effort in this legislature to do some reforms. And to be honest, we at Independence Institute looked at it and said, you know, there was some good stuff in SB 200, but we also just see it as, in the bigger picture, as just buying some time, because there's still structural reforms that have to be made. You just brought it up, this huge structural deficit. And for the first time there is now a line item in the state budget that's going to put $250 million a year directly into para every year, theoretically, unless the legislature wants to monkey with that at some point. But so that is like the beginning of a taxpayer bailout. I mean, what do we have to do moving forward? Give me a couple of suggestions that you have to start trying to bring down that structural deficit and to start trying to match up those promises with the actual money.
Yeah. Well, let's first just talk about Senate Bill 200. You know, though they were talking about it and discussing it during the term, our legislature waited to the last half of the last day of session to pass Senate Bill 200. And my opponent voted against it. So many people would believe it had tremendous bipartisan support and was a step in the right direction to try to start to fix para. It didn't go all the way and still leaves us with about a $30 billion unfunded liability. But it's a shame that our legislature waited to the last half of the last day of session, about 30 or 40 minutes before the bell rang, and shutting down the legislature for the session, to address the single largest debt obligation for the state of Colorado. I mean, this needs to be front and center. We're talking about people and their lives here. This isn't a political football. This is about people. And so to go in and address those issues up front. In terms of my specific solutions, I think that first and foremost, again, meeting with the board, that's number one, and building relationship with them. Number two, I think we need to look at increasing the retirement age for the young people coming into the system. So the people that are already in the system, we have an obligation to them, and we need to meet our duty to the people of Colorado in that regard. But for younger people that are coming in, they're living longer and having productive work lives later into life, and we should increase the retirement age to at least match Social Security, which would be 67 years of age. We need to look at the investment programs. One of the things that I'm really concerned about, and again, a big difference between my opponent and I, he's never had investment experience and been in a fiduciary responsibility with other people's capital. I'm very concerned right now that we are bumping along at the height of the economy in certain areas, the stock market, real estate market, etc. And I've learned in business a natural law of gravity. What goes up eventually comes down.
Yes, it does.
And during the down economy, para lost 11% of its value, which is a pretty big number, and a lot of other people were hit a lot worse in the down economy, the Great Recession of 2008, 2009. But in para terms, that was over $20 billion. So here we stand with a number of 30 billion, which we need to verify that number, and we're right here where the economy may be taking a dip in the next 12 to 18 months. And if it does, all of a sudden our $30 billion problem becomes a $40 or $50 billion problem. And so we need to have spine and leadership and actually do it for the right reasons. A lot of my other suggestions are on my website at brianwatson.vote.
Fantastic. We're out of time, Brian. That went by fast. Thanks for coming by and doing this. We appreciate it.
Appreciate it very much.
You bet.